Welcome to episode 11 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I am your host, Matt Harmon, joined in studio, as always, by my good friend, my colleague here at Grace College and Theological Seminary, my go-to guy for COVID-19 breaking news, and just an all-around good hang, John Sloat.
Never thought I'd hear those words come out of your mouth. Well, if you're listening, please subscribe. We'd love to have you regularly downloading and listening to our podcast, and give us a 5-star review and give us a short review. We certainly take critical feedback. We'd love it. We thrive on it, but we really want a 5-star review. That's what this comes down to.
Absolutely.
And if you're enjoying the podcast, share it on social media, Facebook, whatever. Spread the news about this podcast. We'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean, as we transition into this brave new world that we've entered in the last week,
Yeah, it's been crazy.
People are looking for entertainment, and we think that, this might be an opportunity to spread the word when it comes to the Various and Sundry podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at V&S as well as email us, variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com. Those are two easy ways to reach out to us and connect with us. So here we are.
Yeah, where do you want to start?
Yeah, so I think it's important to note we are recording this on Tuesday morning, March 17th, mid-morning, right?
Yeah, 9:40 we're starting here.
Which, given how rapidly things have changed since our last episode, is an important sort of time marker, because when we recorded last week, we were still very much on the front end, really, of breaking developments when it comes to what's been happening in the culture and our society in the last week or so. And it's laughable now to look at what my hot take was, right? Like, they're going to cancel T4G.
Yeah.
As if that looks like this bold prediction right now. Like, although that's not been officially announced, it's a given that that's not happening.
Yeah. A bold prediction now would be that they're going to cancel Christmas,
Right. So I think, as we normally do, let's start with what I will label as March sadness, since normally March Madness, right?
March Madness.
This is one
happening.
of the great windows of sports during the year with the NCAA tournament, and of course that's not happening. And I'm perhaps most disappointed because we had a bracket competition set up for you as listeners, and now it's all for naught.
Yeah, it's not happening. So.
So basically, there are no sports going on right now.
Yeah, there's nothing going on. So what are some things in sports that are going on that are happening off the court?
Right. So really, the biggest thing that continues at this point is NFL free agency. There's been some trades in the NFL, and even as we were coming in this morning, the breaking news is the fact that Tom Brady announced he will be leaving the Patriots,
which is wonderful news. Very excited that Tom Brady is leaving the division of my team.
Yeah. You assume so. I mean,
I suppose he could go to the Dolphins. He wouldn't go there.
No.
He wouldn't go to the Bills. He's certainly not going to the Jets.
No.
So he's leaving the division.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's pretty safe to assume that he's no longer going to be in the AFC East. So good news for you as a Jets fan. It'll be fascinating to see where he ends up. And of course, an NFL draft is on the horizon. And from what I understand, I think they've announced that they are going to – it's still going to happen, but there's not going to be any gathering surrounded.
Yeah, there's not going to be the party that usually surrounds it, I think.
Yeah. So all of these college pro days are being canceled left and right. All the big schools in college football hold pro days where they showcase their athletes, which is sort of in addition to the NFL Combine.
Yeah. One piece of sports news that seems to have that a lot of news organizations outside of sports have zeroed in on has been Rudy Gobert.
Yes. He's become a household name for people who don't even know about sports, really.
Yeah. And so, first of all, from a sports perspective, what do you know about Rudy Gobert? and then we can tell the saga of Rudy Gobert, I believe on Wednesday last week.
Yeah. So, before all of this, Rudy Gobert was probably best known as a sort of defensive center who, controlled the paint. Not a great offensive threat, but a shot blocker, a defensive presence. I can't remember if he was all-star level or not, but probably on that.
On the cusp.
Yeah, on that cusp of that, but not someone who was a household name unless you really followed the NBA. You really may not have really known much about him at all. And plus, playing in Utah, that's kind of off the national radar.
Yeah, and not a superstar.
No.
But very, very good.
Yeah.
And bordering on that star level.
Yeah,
I'd
that's
say.
probably fair. So, he is the game changer, right?
Yeah, he. Well, first, I believe it was Monday, or maybe it was even before that last week, where he had a press conference where he was joking about the disease, rubbing all the microphones of the press and messing around in the locker room.
Yeah.
And Wednesday, as the NBA is trying to decide, do we cancel, do we not cancel, do we do this without fans? They're saying, let's just play the games. And I remember watching Twitter that day, and you and I were in constant texting conversation.
And sharing tweets back and forth.
And they're getting ready to tip in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
And the GM of one of the teams runs out onto the floor, and all of a sudden the game is canceled.
Yeah.
Rudy Gobert, it's announced, has COVID-19. And at that point, basically all the late starts in the games, all the late starts on the West Coast for the NBA got shut down.
Yes.
And on the East Coast, it was kind of relayed to the players, to the fans, and to everybody that this, for a while, was going to be the last NBA game.
Yeah.
And it kind of set off dominoes for the rest of sports to be canceled eventually.
It did.
By the end of the
week.
It
absolutely did.
Except for the UFC.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Which is a sport that neither of us really follows. With any sort of,
nor have participated in. If you are familiar with the physique here.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, I do think that was a game changer in terms of the world of sports, because obviously, when you had a player who was diagnosed with it, so maybe we should back up into earlier in Wednesday, because Wednesday is really when things accelerated rapidly in terms of the developments. So we had recorded last Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
And at that point, some schools had started to announce that for a few weeks, or maybe through the end of March, that they were moving all instruction online. So getting rid of face-to-face instruction for a few weeks.
And I believe that was Ohio State, Purdue, and IU had sort of been the first ones to fall, at least in our world, that we were able to see.
Yeah. And so at this point, all of the conference basketball tournaments were taking place. So all of those major conferences, Big Ten, ACC, SEC, Big 12, all of them, were starting their conference tournaments. And at this point on Wednesday, so maybe to back up a bit, I had gained tickets to the Big Ten tournament for Thursday.
In Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm. And so I was going to take my two sons and one of their buddies, and we were going to go, and we were going to get to watch 4 games. One of them was going to be Ohio State, so that was exciting. Got great price on the tickets, so just a fun day to look forward to. And so as the development started happening, I thought, okay, I think we're going to make it. I think we're going to get through tomorrow where they're going to still allow fans and be okay. In fact, the Big Ten Conference even announced mid-Wednesday afternoon, I think, or late Wednesday afternoon, we're still moving forward and we're still going to allow fans tomorrow. So I'm like, oh, good, we made it. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, maybe 3 hours later, they announce, we're still keeping the tournament, but no fans. And that kind of became the standard across all these college basketball tournaments of, we're still going to have them, but only essential personnel plus maybe a handful of family members for each kid.
And that was the stand for all of March Madness as well. They were going to have no fans, but they were still going to play the games.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's where we were at Wednesday evening, and then
And during that time, I believe a bunch of schools, a bunch of colleges began to close as well. And I was watching a ticker on the Chronicle of Higher Ed had a ticker going like, this school has done this school.
Yeah.
And I remember it climbing and climbing, getting to about 100 students, and then they just kind of, or 100 students, 100 schools, and they tweeted out, we're not doing this anymore.
right at this point, it's pretty much going to sweep the nation here. So, but it does seem like the game changer was when it was announced that there's an NBA player who has the virus, that suddenly it was, okay, within a matter of less than an hour, the NBA had announced we are suspending the season for a minimum of 30 days. That was sort of that's a baseline. There will be no games for 30 days. And then you began to see other sports leagues follow. And finally, so that kind of got us through Wednesday night.
Yep.
And then
also Wednesday night, Tom Hanks got diagnosed with COVID-19.
Yes.
And I think that was
Announced.
a big wake up call for lots of people. Like, oh my goodness, COVID-19 has hit.
Forrest Gump has COVID-19.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
And though I will say, he posted some sort of video on social media. Clearly had a good humor about it, and that did lead to some funny internet memes and stuff or jokes about, based on some of his former movies and things like that. So it was, a nice little touch, and he clearly embraced it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. And he, I believe, is still in Australia because he got tested while entering Australia and was tested there. And now has it.
And imagine that being quarantined in Australia. But
and I think that made it real for a number of people as well. Like I think this Rudy Gobert thing in sports being canceled made it real for a segment of the population. And then I think for another segment of the population, the Tom Hanks thing made it really real.
But then you began to have some of these announcements. I think it was Thursday morning. Somewhere in this Wednesday night, Thursday morning, the governor of Ohio came out and basically said, no gatherings of over 100 people. And then you had
canceled regular schools as well during that time for 3 weeks. Yeah.
And the dominoes started to fall, so that by late Thursday morning, that's when you had conference tournaments start to officially cancel and say we're not going to play at all. And then I can't remember if it was Thursday night or Friday when they officially announced there's not going to be an NCAA tournament at all.
Yeah.
And of course, in the midst of that, you had these. It just felt like this was one of those stories that you couldn't even get a new baseline on, where it's like it just kept developing so quickly to the point where it's like, okay, now the state of Indiana is saying no gatherings of 250 or more. And now more schools, local schools at both the K through 12 level and universities and colleges making the move to, at least for a period of time, go ahead and cancel face-to-face instruction and move stuff online or extend spring breaks or various things like that.
So what was your state of mind during this week? So we're at about Thursday now. What's your feeling, thoughts, fears? Like what's going through your head during this time?
Well, I think that to me, the big sort of development, the kind of the shocker development was not as much even the sporting events being canceled, because I could see that was coming. Mm-hmm. But when the governor of Indiana came out and said no gatherings of 250 or more, you start to put the pieces together. And we had not yet here at Grace officially announced that we were moving stuff online for at least a period of time. And so, but you and I both suspected like this is going to happen. They're just figuring out logistics and timing of stuff. And
one thing I love about our president at Grace is he doesn't just make decisions.
Yeah,
he makes them with others. And so he was getting the board on the phone and wanting to talk to them about the decision. And even from what I understand, taking a vote Thursday night on what we are to do. So it's been encouraging to see that. But when I realized
this means that we're not going to have church Sunday in all likelihood. And of course, that's what happened is no church.
You were supposed to preach.
And I was on the docket to preach because I preached. I'm supposed to be in the middle of 3 consecutive Sundays of preaching in Galatians 3. So, that was a little of an eye opener of, wow, this is really going to be different. And then, of course, my wife's school shuts down for 4 weeks, and you start to put the pieces together of, this means my entire immediate family, wife and 2 sons, we're all going to be home.
Yeah.
And largely restricted in where we're going and what we're doing.
Yeah.
So those were some of the things that kind of those dominoes falling along the way of that. What about you?
Yeah, I got from Wednesday night into Thursday just really sad.
Yeah.
Like I was just, oh my goodness. You and I had a pretty constant text stream going back and forth.
Yeah.
Of all the terribleness that was happening all at one time.
Yeah.
And I was just getting really, really sad. And then Thursday morning, I get a text from my fiance Andrea, and she tells me that one of her coworkers woke up with a sore throat and a fever, which are a couple of the symptoms. Mm-hmm. And so I text our dean of students on the task force, and they asked me to go home. And so I was like, okay.
Temporarily quarantined.
Yes, and it turns out she did not have this coworker did not have the disease whatsoever, and so I was allowed to return to work on Friday. But for all day Thursday, I was like, here we go, and it kind of doubled up the sadness a little bit, and trying to figure out, goodness, what on earth are we living through? And it it'll be a pretty massive piece of history. I think it'll at least be a line in the history books of what these 3-4 month period was like.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the dynamic that we're all still sorting out is, how long are we in this for? Because I think as some of these initial things happen, it's like, 2 weeks. We're going to shut most things down. And I think the perception was, we do this for a couple of weeks and we're going to get out in front of this, and then we're going to be kind of back to normal in a few weeks kind of thing. And as things continue to develop, there's this settling in of, this is not just going to be a couple of week thing. This is going to be for an extended period of time. And to me, and maybe this is just me, I don't think it is. I think I'm still waiting for the new normal to emerge.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a common experience, that things are still developing, right? At this point, as we record Tuesday morning,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You have the president announcing the sort of, this is not a decree, but this is he's saying you should avoid gatherings of more than 10 or 15 people, which is going beyond what state governments have gone on. And again, that's not you have to do this, but it's just as a sort of a general practice, you should avoid this. And then he says something to the effect of, we're looking at months on this kind of, at some level of alteration of life.
I believe it was, if we do a really good job, July or August, maybe.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
That is a long time. But see, we haven't bottomed out yet, right? We haven't hit that.
It doesn't feel that way, but I don't know what is left to cancel. What's left? I mean, other than, all right, forced quarantine, everybody stay home except essential personnel for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever. That seems to me to be the next, the ultimate. Maybe not the next, but what else is there? I mean. Yeah, restaurants have closed.
Except for carry out and delivery.
Yeah. That's right. But my gym is closed. There's very little access to those sorts of things. What are we to do? What else is what else could go to change the normal? Yeah, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, situations with schools and universities remain fluid in terms of the length of how long they're going, just moving everything online. But I'm seeing tweets from reputable reporters saying the NBA is looking into, best case scenario getting to restart in June, mid to late June.
I saw the same for baseball. Yeah.
And, it begins to make you think, well, gosh, is this going to affect the start of the football season in late August, beginning of September?
Yeah.
Like, how far out are we looking at this sort of disruption of normal aspects of our culture? So I think, to me, until we settle into this kind of new normal where it's like, okay, it feels like everything's kind of bottomed out and we're not going to get worse at this point. I think people are waiting for that kind of new baseline normal to emerge before there's a sense of, okay, I think it'll take that before there's this semi-collective sigh of like, okay, this is where we're at. Because now I still feel like we're in this ongoing, every day it's like getting worse in terms of now you can't do this. Now we're asking you not to do this. Now we're asking you not to do this. Now this is canceled. Now you can't go here.
Yeah.
I think until that kind of stops and gets to this new normal, I think there's going to be this ongoing varying levels of fear and anxiety in our culture.
Let's talk about our classes a little bit.
Sure.
You were teaching Greek exegesis this session.
Yeah.
What on earth is that going to look like?
Well, I'm pretty fortunate in the sense that because of things we've done here at Grace with our one of our seminary programs, the Deploy program, there's a decent bit of content that I'm able to pull from when it comes to recorded lectures or other things that I can just move right into converting that stuff into online lectures that students can access and get course content from. Now, I am at this point planning on doing a kind of a once a week sort of synchronous, like live video meeting, probably using Google Meet or something like that to interact with students. But other than that, it's going to look very similar to a kind of online class, basically converting assignments to online, creating quizzes in the learning management system to get things, away from having to be face-to-face and paper and that kind of stuff. So, as it goes, I have it easy compared to a lot of my colleagues who have much more complicated situations to try to figure out, which includes you. You've got a much more complicated situation with your class.
Yeah, so I have church history this session, as I think we've mentioned before in this podcast. Now, for that, it already has an online component, so it has online quizzes already built into it, and it has online discussion boards built into it. However, I think with lots of history courses, there is a large lecture piece of it.
Yes,
and so trying to figure out how to do that has been interesting. So we're going to do a optional live lecture where students can log in and we can interact, ask questions, those sorts of things. But those will also be recorded that we're posting to the learning management system as well.
Now, your class is a little different than mine in another sense that you have how many students?
46.
Yeah. See, I have 12. So that's a major difference in terms of managing all of those.
Trying to accommodate is going to be difficult.
Right. So this was supposed to be an evening class, right? A 3-hour block evening class.
It was supposed to be a Tuesday night from 6 to 9.
Right. So how are you changing that component of it? I assume you're not. Are you just doing from 6 to 9, we're going to blast through and do 3 hours of class, or have you moved the time? What does that look like?
I'm a little nervous about students at home not having proper Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And so being able to log in and view a live lecture for 3 hours may not be possible.
Right.
It may also not be possible for them to download a lecture that's 3 hours long.
Sure.
I think probably what we're going to do is, and I haven't emailed them this yet, so heads up.
Breaking news.
We'll probably do 3 times a week, 1 hour and do a live session. I'm probably going to go with Zoom just because I have more students, which is another platform we use around here.
Yeah.
So, that's my plan for class. But
yeah, and it is fascinating when it comes to, my wife is a high school teacher at a local private Christian school here, and they've talked through some of these same issues with not being able to assume that students have good Wi-Fi access or internet bandwidth to be able to access course materials and that sort of thing. And so what's interesting is what they've done is they have their administrator has created a policy of, we're not doing new content during this 3 weeks plus
really,
spring break. Yes. Now, what teachers are allowed to, but not required to, give assignments that can take up to, like the guideline is, you can essentially give 2 20-minute assignments per week, or 1 40-minute assignment for the week, or you could have done a project that spans the course of the time off, but it has to be the equivalent of 40 minutes a week and no more.
wow.
And so for my wife as an English teacher, that's been a bit of a challenge to think through. They were she's in the middle of teaching through Romeo and Juliet with freshmen. And so she'd love to be able to say, well, let's just finish the novel and here's some, questions and assignments to kind of keep you, but there's no way they can get through that in 2 20-minute segments per week over the next few weeks. But I'll tell you who has it even worse. Math teachers.
Yeah, math teachers. Yeah, that's going to be a disaster.
What do you do as a math teacher? Because you can't do new content. So the most you can do is just kind of give review assignments of keep these skills sharp. But, English is not one of these kinds of subjects that you're constantly adding new skills. You're generally speaking, you're refining skills, especially if you're in the high school level. You're refining skills that you've already been exposed to, whether it's grammar, whether it's writing, whether it's critical thinking, whether it's literature analysis, those kinds of things. You're not teaching new content in the sense of, here's a new skill you need. Instead, it's, let's develop that skill and go deeper with it. But the poor math teachers, what do you do?
Well, and I know when students come back from summer, they say like, oh my goodness, I got to spend so much time in review to cover what we've already covered. This is going to be similar to that. They're going to have to come back and do a ton of review. They're going to be behind. Oh, it's going to be rough.
It's a mess. And it'll be very fascinating to see how that develops if those time off periods get extended beyond what they currently are. So another factor into this, let's talk a little bit about the church. How you respond as a church in these kinds of contexts where the government says we don't want gatherings of more than 250, and now they've
lowered it.
They've knocked that down since then. But what's been, our church, the church that we are members at, we did not meet this past Sunday, and so as part of the response, our lead pastor recorded about a 20-minute kind of teaching segment. I wouldn't call it a sermon in the traditional sense, in that he wasn't standing behind the pulpit. He was sitting at a conference table.
It was very conversational.
It felt much more conversational. It was really good, really helpful, timely in terms of thinking about anxiety and fear and trusting the Lord. Very well done. So a shout out to Pastor Mark on that one. Appreciate that.
Kudos.
But I noticed that decision was made on Friday to not meet. And so there was a bit of a, what do we do? Let's throw something, let's address this. And they sent out a worship guide where they had suggested scripture readings and, a Spotify playlist that you could, if you wanted to, sing along and sort of try to get some measure of a worship experience.
So one quick, I saw a tweet from Mark Dever who said, this is the second time that his church will cancel for a disease, and the first one was the Spanish flu in 1918, and I thought that was phenomenal. A great tweet where I was like, "Oh my goodness, Wow, that church has been there a while.
It has. That is truly a historic church there, Capitol Hill Baptist in Washington, D.C. But I do know some churches here in the area that still met that were under the 250 threshold.
It'll be interesting to see what they do now with the new threshold. And there's been a variety of responses. Anything from, goodness, we need to cancel for probably longer than we need to this is the government trying to get churches to stop meeting. Really
Yes.
Conspiracy theory sort of stuff.
And I have to mention this because I found this funny. People were there was a small segment going after John MacArthur for bowing the knee to Caesar. So it's one of these discernment blogs or whatever, which is, so ridiculous because they pull this quote from him previously of talking about not bowing the knee to Caesar or something. And then, of course, when they canceled their service this week, they're all over him for, gosh, doesn't take much for the government to come in and shut down John MacArthur. Like okay, people. If that's the level of discourse you're going for, it's hard to take you seriously at all.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's ridiculous. We've canceled services in this country before for disease. We already mentioned the Spanish flu of 1918. I don't see any reason why it would be any different right now.
And here's what people fail to that crowd, I think, fails to capture is the government is not singling out churches. It's saying all gatherings of a certain size. Now, it'd be different if they're like, now you churches, we don't want you to meet, but you schools, go for it. You can continue to meet. Restaurants, you can stay open. Churches, we don't want you to meet because of your fact that you're a religious institution or because even you maybe have a large population of elderly people. Like, if they singled out churches, then you'd be like, okay, that seems odd and targeted.
Which did happen in Kentucky. The governor of Kentucky did single out churches for like an hour.
Yeah.
And it blew up on Twitter.
Yeah.
And then he extended it to everywhere.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, yeah.
Right. So it just seems absurd. But I think that here's the direction I want to move this conversation to. What long-term effect do you think this will have on churches? Like, let's say that at this point, it seems like at a minimum, most churches are probably not going to be meeting for the next month minimum, you think?
Yeah.
I think we can at least safely say that. Though it certainly is possible that this could extend for much more than that. Like, it could extend a couple of months even potentially, or, who knows?
Yeah, I
So
think
what happens to the church? What are there any sort of long-term?
a big emphasis on online giving.
Yes. Yeah, which you joke about that, but it is fair to point out, like, the ministries of the church continue.
Yeah.
And so it's not like
absolutely.
It's not like a service where it's like, oh, well, I don't need my lawn care service anymore, so I'm just not going to pay that bill. That's not the mentality of the Christian when it comes to giving to the church. Yeah. The ministries of the church continue on, and so all kidding aside, it is important that people, whether they give online or whether they end up writing a check and mailing it to the church, doing something to make sure that they're continuing to give to the ministry of the church.
Yeah, and I was kidding, but you are right. That is a big deal, yeah. And something that I take part in online giving at our church, regardless of pandemics.
Yeah.
I think we could see a rise if this continues long term. I think we could see a rise, and I'm interested. I think in the pastoral visit to the home.
Yeah,
I think we've probably seen that fallen on hard times in the last decade, 2 decades.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Where the pastor,
probably right.
I remember growing up, and it was like, well, Monday night the pastor visited new families in the church, those sorts of things. I think we could see pastors doing rounds, going to their congregants' houses and checking in on them spiritually, and those sorts of things. I think we could see a rise in that. I think we could see a rise in video sermons, online sermons, those sorts of things. I saw one seminary was offering their studio for local pastors to come in and record sermons that could be shot out to people, and I thought that was a great idea.
That is, because you don't want to fall into the trap of thinking that every church has the equipment and even the know-how to be able to do that. That there's enough small churches that may not have that equipment or that opportunity, and so to be able to offer, smaller churches to say, yeah, come on in, we'll take care of it. You just stand up there, we'll push record, you do your thing, and then we'll make it shareable for you. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, what are some ways that you think the church is gonna change or morph during this time?
Well, here's what I hope.
Or adapt, maybe.
Here's what I hope. I hope that it will make us appreciate the physical gathering of the church.
Yeah.
That this will create a recognition of there's just something special about the embodied gathering of God's people together in a location that cannot be replicated by watching a live stream on your TV in your living room. Just can't replicate it.
Yeah.
That there's a dynamic that happens, and I'm not saying that that it's a bad thing. Like, this is where we're at right now.
Yeah.
But there's something about the physical gathering of God's people together in the same location physically that I hope this absence of it will actually create a renewed appreciation of it and a renewed desire for it. That's my hope.
Yeah, no, that's I think I could see that being a very positive outcome of this, being something that people really, really enjoy getting together with the church. And I know during times of travel, I have longed to be with my local congregation, and I hope that there's a sense of that from the churches, right? That from the rank and file church member, that they're just like, my goodness, it's been 1, 2, 3 weeks. I'm just dying to get back together.
Absolutely. I want to go one more area before we move on to our athlete.
Okay.
What do we do with this time that we used to devote to sports?
Great question.
This is something that may not affect all of our listeners. We're not assuming. We know that some of our listeners are not big sports fans. We've even heard, horror of all horrors, they actually skip the sports talk. But hey, we're still glad you're here. So thank you for being here. But so maybe this will make this a little bit more personal. Do you have any things that you're thinking, okay, instead of investing time in watching the NCAA tournaments that we would have been watching, instead of watching the NBA, spring training, all those sorts of things, any thoughts on how you're going to use that time or energy?
I'm cooking a little bit more, watching a few more TV shows than I was before, and doing a few puzzles, and I'll get into one of those and the one thing I liked. But that's sort of how I'm filling the time. Reading a little bit more. Now that I am kind of in and out of the office a bit more than I would if students were here. Yeah, but that's about it for me. And that basically fills up the time. I also have a new house that I'm taking care of and doing things with. So,
I do think there is there's going to be an explosion of people doing house projects.
Yeah,
because if you have reduced work time or just more time where you're not out and about doing things, that seems to be a pretty natural thing. I know my brother-in-law and his wife and their 4 kids are repainting the basement.
Yep.
It's sort of we've been wanting to do this. Now we have 4 kids home from school. They need something to do. Let's do this. And saying that my sister-in-law was saying that when she went to the hardware store, Home Depot, Lowe's, wherever they were getting the paint, that the folks there were saying, oh yeah, business is definitely ticking up on that front in terms of people buying paint because you're stuck at home, you're quarantined. Hey, we've always wanted to paint that bedroom. We always wanted to do this. Let's work on that.
So I have an aunt who is, I think, the number 1 salesman in the region of Pennsylvania that they live for Home Depot. Oh. And the state of Pennsylvania has deemed Home Depot and Lowe's and other places like
essential.
And so everybody's going into work still at those places.
Yeah. So I think that that'll be a big piece of it for people. To be
Any
sure.
any particular home projects for you?
I am not handy at all, and so that
Anything that I will be coming over and doing with you?
I do have some ceiling repair in my basement that needs to take place, but I don't know if that's something that's in your wheelhouse, but probably not. Yeah,
No,
that's
no,
all right.
no.
That's all right. But we have talked about we've wanted to paint the trim upstairs in our house in terms of
Okay.
like the white baseboards and trim and that sort of stuff. And taking a very quick turn to a sad note, since we just put down our dog yesterday.
Oh, boy.
Our dog of 12 and a half years, Luther, may he rest in peace. Which was a sad experience. But we're also enjoying some of the opportunities now to repair the house from his presence in terms of doing a deep cleaning. He had a tendency to scratch at some doors if he knew you were in that room. And so
Painting those.
repaint some doors
Sure.
and that kind of stuff. So, and I still want to plant a tree this spring. And I will probably enlist your
Okay,
help for that.
yeah, I can help you plant a
Yeah,
tree.
we'll dig a hole in the backyard
Yeah.
and plant a tree.
I'm thinking about planting a tree in my yard as well. Maybe we could tag team
yeah,
this. and
absolutely.
We can dig holes in one other
I'll
yard.
gladly do that
Yeah.
with you. Yeah, absolutely. So, okay,
Let's talk athlete.
let's talk athlete.
Number 11.
Yes. So on the NFL front, we've got Larry Fitzgerald.
Active player.
Yes, longtime
wide-
receiver for the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, and just got a new teammate in DeAndre Hopkins
Yes.
out there in Arizona. Yeah.
Also in the NFL still, Phil Simms, legendary Giants quarterback from the 80s and into the early 90s, I guess. Yeah, 80s and 90s.
Yeah, I've always known him as more of a broadcaster.
Yeah, that's probably fair. Though he
Sim
won
spotlight.
2 Super Bowls or 1
So he was the quarterback for one Super Bowl, but was injured
for the second
for the
one.
second Super Bowl.
Jeff Hostetler filled in for him.
Yes,
That's right.
and he. A lot of people speculate that if he had been the quarterback under center for that second Super Bowl, he'd be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, wow, that's tough. On the NBA front, Isaiah Thomas, Pistons legend for many years, and in your experience,
Yeah.
train wreck of a general manager for the New York Knicks.
And I believe coach for a season as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was bad, very bad.
But a fantastic basketball player.
That's what I hear. And I would recommend, if you're on the coronavirus quarantine kick, the Bad Boys documentary
it's fabulous.
is very, very good.
That's a 30 for 30, right?
Yeah, ESPN.
ESPN 30 for 30, yeah. Also from the NBA, Yao Ming.
Yeah. Yao Ming was the how tall was he? Was he
7'6"?
7'6" Chinese center for the Houston Rockets for a number of years.
Yeah.
And he was quite fun to watch, and has been an ambassador for the game to China the last several years. You still see his name come up.
And that's probably one of the best arguments you can make for his significance. As an actual player,
Did okay.
he was a good NBA player. Not great, but a good one.
Yeah.
But in terms of opening up China to the NBA, he was absolutely essential.
And why it's why China's favorite team is the Houston Rockets.
Yes. Yeah. Also, although I'm not a huge hockey fan, Mark Messier.
Yeah, played for the New York Rangers when I was living in New York, won a Stanley Cup there in 94, I believe. And I remember being, 6 years old and watching Mark Messier, Adam Graves, Brian Leach, all these guys win the Stanley Cup. Of course, I went to bed and had to watch the reruns the next morning.
Right.
Because I made my parents record it for me on a VHS tape so I could watch it the next day.
Yeah. So, in terms of Ohio State football players, Antoine Winfield, great cornerback for the Buckeyes, had a really strong NFL career as well. Von Bell, Anthony Gonzalez also wore number 11. But where are we landing on this?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I know you're not a big hockey fan, so we can. Do you want to mark Messier off the list?
I'm fine with that. Yep.
Okay. This I'm going to throw you a curveball.
Okay.
What about Yao? we're affected by this disease that had its origins in Wuhan,
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, let's continue the process. We can get rid of Phil Simms.
Yeah, I think we get rid of Phil Simms pretty
So
easily.
I feel like we're down to Larry Fitzgerald, Isaiah Thomas, and Yao Ming. Man, Isaiah Thomas was really good with the Bad Boys, the Pistons of the late '80s, early '90s. But
I have a terrible association
yeah,
with him.
I get that. So I'm happy with, I semi-twisted your arm last episode to go with Steve Nash. So I'm not gonna. So to me, it's down to Larry Fitzgerald or Yao Ming. And
very different people.
Yes, very different. I think that Larry Fitzgerald suffers from the fact that he plays in Arizona.
Yes.
If he played in a major market team, if he played for one of the New York teams, if he played for a California team, if he played for, even in the Midwest, if he played for someone like Chicago or Green Bay, one of these sort of like classic traditional powers, I think he'd be held in much higher esteem. He is great. But I agree with you. I think we should go with Yao Ming.
Yao Ming. Yeah. The more I think about it, the more I like it.
Historic and international significance there, I think.
And a connection to China for us.
Yeah. I mean, we went with a Canadian last week, last episode. Now we're here with...
tapping into that China market.
Yeah. Maybe we'll take off suddenly there. Okay. We got to get to one thing we liked this week. So we're going with Yao Ming. Okay. Got that.
Yao Ming. Okay, one thing I like this week
Yeah.
is my fiance and I have subscribed to Hunt a Killer.
Yes.
And basically every month they send you a piece of this case. So our first one we opened up and we got this big box of documents. And basically what has happened in this case is this Broadway theater in New York had been family run for 3 generations, and the person was good. The person that owned it was going through the attic and found a body, and it had been the body of an actress that just disappeared in the 20s or 30s, and you're trying to figure out the killer well after the fact. So all the suspects are probably dead, right? All these things, and so you're trying to okay, here's everything that was found in the attic, and it's all cataloged. Here's the wound. What corresponds? What's and then you're looking at the playbill and trying to figure out who could potentially be the killer and all these things. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've seen that advertised. It looks like an interesting thing.
Great for coronavirus quarantines.
Yeah. Also great for COVID-19 quarantine is the documentary American Gospel. So this is like a 2-hour documentary that has been put together essentially as an expose and criticism of the prosperity gospel.
Okay.
And it's very well done. And it has a lot of people that are kind of from our tribe in evangelicalism. Guys like Mark Dever, Paul Washer, Steve Lawson, Brian Chappell.
What platform is it on? Can we find it on...
So I believe
Prime, is it free online? And what's
I believe you can watch the first hour of it free on YouTube.
Okay.
But to watch the full thing, you have to purchase it. So we watched it because one of Jake's friends has the DVD. So we watched it last night, all 2 hours. Very well done, very well produced. Also, Costi Hinn is in there, interviewed in there. Benny Hinn's nephew, who came out of that whole prosperity gospel movement and is now a very solid evangelical. He's a pastor now.
Is he a pastor? Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
So very good, very worth watching there. American Gospel, that you can just search that on YouTube and find that.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So again, we're approaching 50 minutes here, but I feel like here's the thing. I feel like we have a little bit more latitude now that we are in COVID-19 lockdown, right?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I feel like...
Perhaps.
I hope that our listeners will extend us a few more minutes of time, since in all likelihood they might have a few extra minutes of time on their hands these days. So, but we definitely need to get a little bit more disciplined here in our time management skills when it comes to recording the podcast. But I believe it is safe to say that we have accomplished our mission of covering our various and sundry topics. And so until next time, the Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.